Have you guys ever ordered anything from Costco online? This is my new thing this year is Costco online. And it's great because A, you don't have to go to Costco because here we are in COVID times and nobody wants to go to
Yeah.
Costco. But and if well, okay, so I had to buy $200 worth to get the free shipping because they charge you extra on some of the items for shipping, which is fair, right? But
Hmm.
it boggles my mind. They've been sending me like one package a day. Like FedEx just showed up and
Right. Yeah.
it's one tub of laundry detergent. It's like,
They
where do
must
you have
not
10
pay.
things?
Yeah,
Like,
that
imagine
doesn't
how much
sound
we
cost
have to pay
effective.
to ship that. Like,
It's
they must get it for nothing.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous. It is
Yeah.
absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
So
strange.
Careful. One thing though, I heard a rumor that even though it's free shipping, they still inflate some of the prices from in store.
that's a good point. We're gonna have to keep this in the show now that we're talking about it. This might be a quick hit for the week. Um,
All right.
I've heard that as well, and so I was doing a little bit of price comparison. I don't know, Cory, if you noticed it on the Facebook group this week. Somebody had, or no, maybe it was on Twitter. Somebody had gone through and done like a full analysis of the
Oh yeah,
cost of items, and I'm like, whoa, they went deep down the rabbit hole doing like
yeah.
multi-store comparisons on the Costco pricing. But good
Uh-huh.
point because you can pay a little bit more online. But you know what? For the convenience of not going to Costco, I'm kind of okay with a couple bucks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Anyway, welcome to the Financial Independence Garage, where we share the tools to improve your finances and unfold the roadmap to financial independence. And it is the money mechanic with you as always. And we have the economist on the show tonight, and the accountant is strangely missing because he's trying to add to his real estate portfolio. So we support that, but he may jump in and join us a little later on the show. We also have a guest with us tonight to join us in our lovely banter and beer drinking fun. It is Cory from Ontario. Welcome to the show, Cory. Nice to have you here.
Hey, thanks guys. Thanks for having me on.
Now, I'll get you to tell your own backstory, but just to fill in the listeners a little bit of how we met, it was through the online Choose FI Canada Facebook group, which is a great membership, lots of good discussion in there. And we actually were kind of met through an online meetup that there's last year sometime. We're all locked in our houses and everybody's needed a little bit of social interaction. So we got chatting, and I thought your story is really interesting because, like myself, you are in the trades. So we're going to talk tonight about the choice to go into trades and how that looks a little bit different about getting to financial independence, and some of the obstacles of being in the trades as far as like we talked about having toys, spending money on dirt bikes, snowmobiles, whatever it is. It kind of seems to go hand in hand. We'll get into that, and we're also going to talk about because you and I are both car guys. And that's an interesting side bit of FI too, because we've talked about how you spend on what you value, but transportation is the second biggest cost. So we need to dig into that a little bit and maybe pass on some of our car knowledge to the listeners tonight, and a bit of our passion too, I guess. So, but before we get into all that, the most important part, why everybody's actually really here, is the beer. Is that not correct? Did you not say when I said come on the podcast, you go, as long as I get to drink some BC beer, and we said we'll drink Ontario beer.
Yeah, we did a switcheroo.
Yeah, so I have the Collective Arts. What is it here? It is the Stranger Than Fiction Porter. Economist, what do you have?
Ah,
Oh, we don't have the same one.
No,
I have the Life in the Clouds DDH IPA. Now,
double dry hopped.
there we go.
that's good choice. Both of
I,
those are good choices.
I know my beer. Okay, you've had these
Yeah.
before, Cory?
Yeah, I actually have a. Did you say Saint of Circumstance? I have that one in my. Or no, Stranger Than Fiction. I have
Stranger Than
that in
Fiction.
my. Yeah, I have that in my beer fridge actually.
Nice.
But yeah, today I have a Fat Tug, and I also
Nice.
have a.
Awesome. That is like well, some would say like the best IPA over here on the island. Maybe even in British Columbia. I won't go.
People
I won't
I've
go
had.
national. I won't go national
I've
because I'll
had.
get hate mail.
people would say that though.
Yeah, it's a good one, and it was featured in the FI Garage beer tube that I sent out to, I believe it was Mark Seed. I sent a Fat Tug to because he's an IPA guy too. So, have you had it before? Or is this the first time?
The second time I think I've had
Oh,
it. Yeah.
I wanted the first time reaction, but
Oh, well, it was probably like 5 years since I've had it, so this will be like a fresh, a new try.
Nice.
cheers,
Cheers.
gentlemen.
Cheers.
That virtual background really hurts you, economist.
It hurts the cheersing. I have to basically cheers in front of my face.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Ooh, ooh.
That's delicious.
I do like a good porter. I don't drink porters very often because there's a lot of flavor in them, but
Not a flavor guy,
yeah, you can tell that.
Yeah,
from
who
the
doesn't?
idea.
Who doesn't hate flavor? I mean,
Yeah.
it's the worst.
I
Absolutely.
want no flavor in my beer. No, it's good. I always find like porters and stouts to me. I mean, I'll drink a Guinness stout anytime because I don't really like Guinness, but they're a bit more of like a wintry type drink for me. I feel like having a nice sort of thick porter. And interestingly enough, like this one is it was 5.5%. A lot of people like I can't drink porter because it totally fills me up. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I think an IPA with a higher ABV actually has more calories in it than a porter. What do you think, Cory?
Calories, yes, but I guess like a lot of porters are thicker, so maybe it's the thickness. I don't know. I'm not a scientist or a chemist, so I don't know how
Nah.
this works.
Okay, well, tell us what you are then.
Okay, well, I am a machine tool builder and integrator, which is like it's a trade that's only really recognized in Ontario. And then I'm also a Red Seal millwright, which is like nationally recognized trade, which I got. Right out of high school, I got my machine tool builder apprenticeship, which I think like a lot of kids these days, they don't really consider the trades for whatever reason. Like if they're getting good grades in school, people don't push them towards the trades. They're usually pushed towards university. And I got good grades in school. I was an honor roll student, and I did have a few people pushing me towards university, even though there wasn't really anything that gave me any interest in that, like in that range. I was always interested in cars ever since I was a kid. So I wanted to be a mechanic for years and years and years. And then when people told me about tool and die maker and I discovered machine shop in high school, I kind of realized I was kind of good at it, and there's lots of money to be made in the trades. So luckily my parents, they were very encouraging. My dad was an appliance repairman for many years, so he kind of pushed me in that direction. And it's good because I find with university, typically you end up with a bunch of debt at the end of it, or you end up having to work a whole bunch while you're in school just to prevent that from happening. And with me, because I've always been like a frugal weirdo who just stashes away a bunch of money. Right out of high school, like working this trade, the way apprenticeships work, you're going to school once a week, and you're just working, learning while you earn. And usually you'll get like 2 or 3 raises through the year as your skills improve. And I started out at like $11 an hour, and as I got like $1, another $1, like you probably get like $3 worth of raises every year. And I would just take that raise and put it straight towards saving towards like a down payment for a house. And so after 4 years of doing an apprenticeship, I had my license, and well, my parents were planning on moving out of town to Tobermory, and they told me I wasn't welcome to come along. So
Get out.
Luckily, yeah, pretty much. I was I guess 21, and I had like 50 grand saved up for a down
Awesome.
payment on a
Wow.
house.
That's a good spot.
So I was pretty fortunate, and yeah, so I just jumped in on that, and I did lose my job like a year later because this big recession thing happened in like 2008, 2009. So that's what put me back into, I went back to school through a program in Ontario called Second Career, and got my millwright ticket after a couple of years. They gave me some credit for having this previous ticket. And yeah, that got me into what I'm doing now. So
yeah, go ahead, economist. Do you want to jump in there before I go?
Well, I don't want to beat down on university or anything, but
I knew there'd be a university defender here.
you mentioned that you get to earn money, throughout the period you're going to school. But not only that, you're working towards an actual tangible job. Whereas if you go to university, a lot of the programs, you don't know what you're working towards. You're just there to get a grade, really, right? So not that there's anything wrong. university, but it's definitely a plus for the trades program.
Definitely don't want to rag on university. Like I'm not trying to do that, but you get some real world experience. Yeah.
Well, from my own personal experience, I mean, just to share a bit of my backstory as well, it kind of resonates with you there as well, Cory. I didn't know as soon as you did, like in high school, I didn't take shop classes. I was more on the academic side. I was doing the sciences because, it's like, well, the goal was to get into university, but same thing. I had no clue what I was going to do there. I hadn't found a passion yet. And being single mom, money was tight. So I was basically funding my own schooling. And I did a little bit of college after I left high school. And it was the typical thing that a lot of people do, right? You go take some psych courses, some criminology, some geography, the general studies. It's like, I'm doing general studies. What kind of job am I going to get from general studies? And I happened to be working at a furniture store. And like you, I'd always been into cars. My dad loved motorsports. Him and my grandfather were into karting in the Channel Islands where I was born. And so there was that kind of mechanical side to the family. Growing up young with a single mom, it was always put on me to attempt to fix things. Not often did I succeed, but sometimes I did. But I'd never really put that together with what my career was going to be. And the guy I was working for at the furniture store, he kind of said to me, he said, well, you've taken some college courses and that's fine, but where do you see yourself? Like, what do you fit into? What do you enjoy doing? And it was, building, creating, fixing, troubleshooting. Troubleshooting was the number one thing that I really liked to do, right? And that's probably why I really love this sort of finance and getting into that now, because a lot of discussing how to invest properly and doing that, it's a bit of a troubleshooting exercise that's kind of personal to all of us. But anyway, not to get too far off track here, I got into I did electronics first, and then I got into aircraft electronics, and then I did aircraft maintenance. And it was like you said, your story is the same. As you get out, you're an apprentice, you're earning money, you haven't sunk a ton. I know the fees have gone up for the program now, but back then I was student loaned, but I owed 15 grand. Well, that wasn't terrible because my first job was right away out of school. It was for, I think it was 15 or 16 bucks an hour. And, this is 20 years ago, right? So that's pretty good money without a lot of debt, just like you said. And in this FI community, I noticed there's another, you're not on Twitter, but there's, I think it's Findependence 40. He's an auto mechanic in Manitoba or Ontario. He'll correct me on that, I'm sure. But we don't hear a lot of representation from the trades in the FI community. The typical stereotype is the tech bro or the software engineer, like Millennial Revolution. And they're like really high paying salaries, but they're a long road to get there, right? Where like for us, it was like, boom, you're earning money right away. But what are the downfalls of that? And I think that's the interesting part, because if we knew what we know now about getting to financial independence, what would we have done differently, when you started your career? Because one of the things I see in the trades is people start making good money right away, and they're with like-minded people that are into, whether it be cars or dirt bikes or those kind of very expensive type hobbies. What would you have done differently? What are kind of some of the pitfalls of earning a lot at the beginning?
One thing that stands out to me, I wouldn't have spent $800 on a carbon fiber hood for my Dodge Neon.
It went faster though.
Oh yeah, that like 20-pound hood only weighed 5 pounds after the carbon fiber. So yeah. Out of all the things, that's what just always, I'm like, wow, that was kind of dumb. But yeah, like, I don't know, especially with cars, like there's a lot of like, if you have a bunch of car guy friends, there's a lot of upsmanship going on. Everybody wants more horsepower. Once somebody gets a supercharger, now you got to throw a turbo on your car, and then he lowered his car lower than yours is, so now you got to get the new like coilovers to put on your car. Oh, this guy, he got $4,000 works rims for his whatever, and now you got to get something better. And it's like it's a treadmill, just like everything else. You're just trying to keep up with the Joneses or do better. But yeah, that's the biggest thing for me. Cars are such a terrible hobby for somebody in the fire pursuits or whatever. But I mean, there are ways that you can make wise decisions. Like For me, like I bought back in 2012, I bought a 1973 Plymouth Duster, and at first glance, it was a terrible decision because it actually wasn't running when I went to go see it. It was supposed to be running. I was supposed to be able to test drive it, but it showed up on a flatbed. And I should have taken that as a warning sign, but then I bought it anyways the next weekend when I went. And this was like 5 hours away in Ottawa, and the car ended up dying on me in Napanee, so I had to get it towed like home. So it seemed like a very terrible decision at the start. But I bought this car for like 10 grand. I put probably 8 grand worth of parts into it.
Wow.
And
Okay. Yeah.
I sold it for like 15 grand. So like I lost money. I lost about 3,500. I had it for about 7 years. Spent about $500 a year maintaining it.
Yeah.
Insurance for classic cars is super cheap in Ontario. Yep. It's like $140 a year.
Did you have to have another car insured to get that, right?
Yeah, and there's a bunch of restrictions. You can't drive it to work. You're supposed to only use it for like pleasure driving or going to car shows and stuff.
It's a Duster. You're just trying to peel the tires off the back of it, aren't you?
Well, exactly. And it has no safety features, no brakes. It doesn't handle. Like, it's the most dangerous thing on the road, and yet they're only charging you $140 a year to drive it.
Yeah,
it doesn't make sense. But like all in, like outside of like gas, it really only cost me about $800 to $900 a year. So for me, I don't travel much. Like I've never been to Cuba or Hawaii or anywhere tropical. So for me, that was the substitute. So I think there are ways to be, sort of cost efficient with in the car hobby, at least. That's my experience.
Yeah, I think, both you and I do our own work on the cars, and that's definitely an advantage from our trades background to sort of I think one of the things that I notice is that people are fearful of trying it themselves, because if it's not something they do at work, it's hard to have the confidence to be like, I'm going to change my brakes. And I'm like, disc brakes could not be easier to change. If you have a jack and you can borrow a few tools from a friend, it's like 2 bolts that lift the carrier off, and you put the, it's, unless you got a 4-wheel drive and trying to change the rotor, that might get into a little more fun stuff. But I think we have that advantage if you value the hobby, like you said you did. And, a lot of what we talk about in the FI community is spend on what you value, right? So if you're getting joy from it, and for me, part of the joy of owning cars was working on them, right? It's making something work. It's finding the problems. It's making it better, making it what you want. But being able to do it yourself saves a ton of money. And maybe one of the tips of this show is, if you don't do your own work, that's fine if that's like a choice. I'm not crawling under my car to change my oil. But if you have the means,
you're not.
Oh, of course I am.
Okay, good.
Okay, a little off topic here, but Cory, because this is a classic Canadian question: have you ever had to repair your car in a Canadian Tire parking lot?
Well, does changing a battery count?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've done that in a Costco parking lot because it's a pain in the ass to bring the old battery back next time. But no, I always felt it was like, because there was a Canadian Tire in where I grew up, and so it was like, oh, you jack up the car in the Canadian Tire parking lot because you're not really sure when you take the wheel off, like, what do I need to get this job done properly? Right. So they've put there's a sign at our Canadian Tire in Victoria that says no automotive work in the parking lot. So it's clearly common. I've been there.
Oh yeah, for sure.
From an FI point of view, we know that transportation is super expensive. So if you can do some minor jobs yourself, I mean, like you said, changing a battery is not hard. It's bolts on the top. It's some sort of hold down. You can do it safely. We are so lucky to have the number of YouTube videos just like this one.
Well, we're about to start teaching people things.
Yeah, well, I've always wanted to do a teach me channel, but
this is for entertainment purposes only, buddy.
There you go. Thank you for getting that in there. But yeah, when I was starting off, so the car that I was trying to work on that my single mom had was a 76 Plymouth Volare station wagon. So you had the cool Dodge. I had the really crappy Dodge.
That was the one that came after the Duster.
Yeah. But did the Duster, that was a V8 in your Duster, right?
Yeah, it was
obviously.
a 340.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because the Volare had the slant six, which was an awesome engine in the 70s. The slant six was really
Oh,
good.
bulletproof. Yeah.
But I had, like, here's just people that are listening that have opened up a Haynes manual before, right? I'm sure you have too, The Economist, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
His, sorry, I'm getting off topic, but anyway, I opened the Haynes manual and it's always assembly is the opposite of removal type thing. And here I am with this Plymouth Volare at 15 years old going, how do I get the door panel apart? And it's just like, you just kind of keep going until it comes apart, right? Where now it's just like, boom, YouTube, remove this first, remove this clip, remove this hidden thing. And you're like, oh, there's the window inside. So we're pretty lucky nowadays. It's a lot easier to DIY it than when I fumbled through it.
Yeah.
No, I was going to say, Cory, I'll let The Economist tell you what his dad's been hiding in his garage for how many years, Economist?
Oh, he got rid of it.
Oh, he did. But tell us what it was.
Yeah. It was a 73 Corvette with like
Nice.
no miles on it.
Stingray, like 0 miles on it.
Yeah.
What?
Bright yellow, like mint, showroom condition.
Yeah. And
I was over there helping him around at the house. I can't remember. I was over at your parents' place there one time, and he pops open this garage door, and I'm like, that's dusty, but that's a really nice looking vet, like mint condition. This close to buying it from him.
Yeah, it never saw the rain.
Never saw the rain.
No.
Which is saying something on the West Coast.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
right,
I hear. Does it actually rain all the time? Like, part of me wants to move out there, but if it's gonna rain all the time, I'm out.
Just don't move to Vancouver.
Yeah.
If you don't move to Vancouver, you're fine.
No. Economists were supposed to say it rains all the time. We don't want any more people from Ontario out here.
That's right.
You guys are driving up our house prices. All right, well, let's get back to the trades journey a little bit from the FI journey. Tell us a little bit about your actual FI journey and kind of maybe just an overview of where you're at, how things have progressed, and what it's looking like. You don't have to get into any details, but whatever you're comfortable sharing.
Okay, sure. Well, we could start like as a child. My parents were always very frugal, and they gave me a lot of good money habits. They actually were early retirees themselves. My dad was 53, nice. And I think my mom was 50 when they retired. And like I said, he was an appliance repairman. It's not like he was a CEO of some company making millions of dollars. They had modest income and modest lifestyle, and managed to get out early. And I think my grandpa as well did a similar thing. So I guess I could be like technically third generation doing this.
Nice.
So yeah, as far as I go, never made a whole lot of money up until like 4 years ago. I was never really made more than like 50, maybe 60 grand a year. But I maintained a pretty steady savings rate, like about 40% savings rate. Spending usually doesn't go over over the past like 12 years, I've averaged like 30 grand a year.
Wow, that's impressive. Now, just before we keep going here, what's your home situation as far as family wise? Is just you or wife, kids?
It's just single. I do have a roommate that rents a room for me.
Just
so
from a spending perspective, so listeners can be like, okay, that's one person for that price, not like a
family
of four, right?
Family of five, yeah. No. So yeah, money's always it's always come as kind of second nature for me to just watch my spending, except for cars. Sometimes like I'll be debating on whether to get like the cheapest thing on a menu at a restaurant, but meanwhile I won't think twice about buying an intake manifold for my duster. It's kind of silly.
Running premium gas.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but yeah, as far as where I'm at now, like I was basically focusing on my mortgage because I bought the house when I was 22, lost my job a year later. So I was very there was a lot of stress in my life back then, and seeing that mortgage, just wanting to get that balance down as quickly as possible. So just in case, if I lose my job again, I don't have as much to worry about. Mm-hmm. So that was a big focus in my life for a long time. And I kept, thinking I really should be saving more for retirement. I was only saving like $100 a month in my RRSP, but I was only making like 4% a year in this crappy CIBC or sorry, I shouldn't like plug the actual bank, but
It was a
an
GIC. I remember those GIC. Oh, you were an active. Okay. Yeah.
It was an active mutual fund and had a 2.5 MER, and I was making like 4 or 5% every year. And it was just, I'm like, well, I'm paying like 5.65 on my mortgage on interest because I had like a fixed rate. I'm like, it makes more sense to just pay this off. People are telling me the interest rates are just going to go up. And so I just focused on that for years and years and years. And then now, as I've gotten closer and closer to getting that balance to zero, I'm like, man, I really need to start doing investing. And maybe 3 years ago, I started listening to Canadian Couch Potato podcast and learned more about index funds and all that. I'm like, oh, well, okay, this seems like the good transition. This is what I should be doing. So I scaled back on the mortgage and started getting more aggressive with the saving in my RSP and TFSA. Well, actually, to be honest, up until this past March, I had like 0 in my TFSA, which is a real faux pas in our circles. But
hey, everybody's journey is different.
Lots of room.
Yeah, I was so focused on that mortgage, but I did, as a great bit of foresight, I was like, well, if one of those like recession type things happen again, maybe I should get a HELOC, and then I can just jump in when stuff drops, So amazingly, it happened in March, and it was kind of hard to pull the trigger at first because it dropped so quick.
Yeah.
We're thinking, oh, it's going to drop more. It's going to drop more. And then near the end of March, it started going up again. And I'm like, oh, did I just miss the boat? Do I need to get in now? Like, is this a dead cat bounce? Like, I'm reading all the articles you shouldn't read.
Yeah.
And then I decided, well, maybe I should there's a financial advisor through our group pension plan at work. Like, it's like a direct contribution plan. So I emailed him, told him my whole backstory, what I was considering doing, and got on the phone with him. And he's like, yeah, normally I wouldn't tell someone to take 90 grand out of their HELOC to throw into the market during a pandemic. That's never happened. Like, but it sounds like if anyone's going to do it, you stand a good chance of not screwing it up. I'm like, okay, all right, that's all. I just needed a little push.
Nice.
That's all I needed. And I'm like, okay, what kind of time frame do I need to do this over? And he's like, well, things have been moving quickly. I'm like, well, like should I be just doing like $5,000 a week? Because this could be like a 2-year long thing. And he's like, I don't know, stuff moves pretty quick. Maybe you should just take like 20%, put it in next week, another 20 the next week. I'm like, that's a lot of money. I'm like, that's like 20 grand a week. I'm just gonna click buy. Like, the world is on fire right now. Like, This is the end of the world. Like, really? Like, okay, all right, sure, let's try this. And I did it, and I was fully prepared. Like, this could be the next Great Depression, and we won't see another recovery for 5 years. But pretty stably, like financially, I'm pretty stable. So I was prepared for that, and I got lucky and made like a good return on that investment. So yeah, that's where I'm at now. I maxed out my TFSA, and now it's like sitting at like almost 100 grand. So it's
nice.
Well done, well played. And I definitely applaud your ability to handle that from the psychological standpoint, because you totally like I can just imagine, like I'm the biggest hypocrite, because here I am on the FI Garage for the last 2 years, and I do like a pseudo type Smith maneuver, and I have leveraged investments and all the rest of it, but I didn't have the cojones to take that 75K, or would have been 68 last year, and just boom, hit the market within March. And hindsight being what it is, of course I should have done it, but I already had my plan. I was following my investment strategy. I continued to buy all the way through. So it wasn't an urgency, but good for you for pulling the trigger on that and getting it done.
I did trip up a bit on the last buy, the last like 20 grand. Stuff had already bounced up. Like I think I bought in at like an average of like $23 on VQT.
Okay, VQT.
Yeah. And it was up to like $25 by then, and it had bottomed out at like 21. And I clicked buy, and then I'm like, well, maybe I should be allocating some to bonds. Like I had like 10% of my money in bonds before. Maybe I should just do that and just wait for it to drop again. And then I sold it, and then I bought the next week after it had gone up like 50 cents. I kind of danced, and then finally I just like, no, I'm just like eroding that money away by like trying to like time things.
Yeah.
And I really don't want this, like, oh yeah, this is great, successful story. It was easy. I just clicked buy, and now I made like 40 grand. Woo, it's easy. You can do it too.
Yeah.
Just
wait for the next pandemic.
Yeah, I don't want to give people that like hope and then have them like blow up their portfolio because they made a bad call, and then they have like a big HELOC that they're on the hook for. So yeah, don't do that unless you are fully aware of the consequences, because HELOCs are callable and all that other scary stuff. So.
Now, here's a question for you. As far
Hold
as
up before you ask it.
why you always interrupt me?
Because I want to know if you wanted to start a new call here.
One of these days,
yeah.
maybe Zoom will sponsor us, so we don't have to use the.
That'd be nice.
This is the frugal version, so we have to update the call. This is, I guess, where we're going to fit in. Let's go to the beer fridge and get another beer. How's that Fat Tug, by the way?
That's good, but it's too full. I don't know why I'm not drinking it quickly.
You've been talking too much.
That's the problem. We make our guests talk so we can be drinking.
Yeah. This line in the clouds, this is delicious.
Well, it's double dry hop. Dry hopping is the key to a good IPA.
Yeah, I drink a lot of this.
Definitely.
How's the nose on that? Because the Fat Tug has an awesome nose, because they do a lot of dry hopping in that as well. It's a lot of Citra hops in that one.
You know what? It's not bad, but it almost has that like older. Oh, this is from what? Oh, best before March 28th. Okay, so
ooh, getting close. At least it's in a can. It hasn't gotten skunky from a bottle. Oh, yours looks nice and hazy there, Economist. Show me that one again.
Yeah, no, it is. It's there we go.
There you go. Oh yeah, that's nice and hazy.
It is.
Collective Arts is one of the best breweries in Ontario, I'd say.
Nice.
All right, we'll be we're making a run to the beer fridge. We'll be right back.
All right.
He's having a trash pounder. Well, we're back and we have fresh beers, so that's awesome.
We should thank Cory for this round.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's right. It is your
appreciate
round.
it.
We do appreciate it. And although you did not send me this, the magical FI Garage beer tube delivered me a my camera's terrible. A Two Flags IPA from Dominion City Brewing in Ottawa. So thanks, Blair. I'm still drinking your beer tube, even though somehow Cory bought this beer for me, but we won't get into that. That was a Collective Arts buy.
Yeah.
It says Two Flags is an assertively hoppy, deliberately well-balanced, and highly drinkable India Pale Ale brewed with 100% locally grown Cascade hops from family-owned farms in Ontario and Western Quebec. Keep cold and enjoy fresh. So there you go. What did you pull out there? You got the Trash Panda. I love the name.
Yeah. It's good. It's hazy.
It's good.
I think, have you guys had this on your podcast before?
We had the Wiley Wolverine.
Nah, totally different.
That's a different company. Yeah.
That's Parallel 49. That's over on the mainland there.
Oh, I've had it in the curling club.
Yeah, I
never on the show.
I can't actually say I've seen the hazy in the stores here, but I'll have to have a look out for it, because I'm definitely weak on it's the northeastern hazy IPAs that are good. But I don't know about you, Cory, but I might be more into the hazy pale ales now.
Oh.
Not quite as killer hop to them. Or I mean, they have as much of the hop nose, but not quite as much of the killer bitterness.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm a fan of that too. I used to just love the bitterness. I loved like it tasting like a bar of soap, but I'm definitely like preferring I like the New England IPAs are definitely my choice right now.
It's the choice of the trades Canada-wide.
Mm-hmm.
One of the problems that I noticed on my I wasn't really on my FI journey until like the last sort of 5 years. So it took me a while to get things figured out as well. I was lucky that I didn't, I mean, I spent a ton on cars, but they were like cheap cars. I was a Volkswagen guy. So it was like pretty easy to fix a 1982 Volkswagen Rabbit. Like I did every job on that car.
Yeah.
My wife was very reticent is a word I like to throw around. I taught her to do brakes on her 1993 Nissan Pathfinder back when we were first sort of got together, and she was not thrilled that day, but she learned how to do front brakes. Anyway, I digress.
Has she done them since?
Hell no. not with this
Not
guy
a
around.
valuable skill then. No, for her.
Yeah. Speaking, I brought home a helicopter part that had, Cory will understand what I'm talking about. It's a reduction gearbox. So basically when you move the helicopter stick, it gives you force feedback. So it reduces the amount of motion. So there's like all these gears that are meshed together so that when the arm moves, everything has to spin really fast inside. It slows the momentum down. Anyway, it's too technical to describe, but I brought it home for her in pieces one day and was like, see if you can put this puzzle back together. We're still together, so I don't know. It worked out. No, what I was going to say was one thing that I've noticed from being in the trades over, I've been in there for 20 years now, is a lot of my coworkers, and I don't think this is unique to the trades at all, but they're not great with their money. They make a good living wage, but they spend what they earn. They live beyond their means. I've worked lots of overtime. I do out of town work. I've worked overseas. There's lots of extra pay that comes with that additional work. It's not a typical 9 to 5. It's not a typical salaried position. There's, it fluctuates. You can speak, Cory, of whether yours is similar or not, but the general thing is it's about owning toys. And like you brought up earlier, the one-upsmanship, and it's like, check out my stuff. And it now, where I'm at with sort of the understanding of financial independence and finances in general, it's really hard because I see people living beyond their means, and it's difficult. And I'm sure it's not just the trades, but it's my experience. What have you seen from your coworkers and friends that are in industry with you, Cory?
No, I definitely agree. Like, it's the general consensus is the guy who dies with the most junk wins, basically.
Toys, not junk. Toys, come on, but it is junk. It is junk.
Like, I'd say, like, I don't know, where I'm working currently, there's not a lot of like guys with a bunch of flashy toys or anything, but I definitely noticed like other jobs where, yeah, the guys, like, they don't pick one hobby. It's like they got the four-wheeler, they got the boat, they got the classic car, dirt bikes, anything with wheels and
a motor. Yeah.
And then, plus then you need to get the big shop to store all this stuff. And so you need a big property. And then so your real estate costs go up. And I almost fell into that too. Like, working on a duster in the middle of the winter, trying to replace brake lines when you got this like 4-foot long brake line that you're trying to bend up and you're trying not to scratch the paint in this single car garage. Mm-hmm. It's not fun. And it's part of the reason why I got rid of the duster, because I just didn't have room to work on it. And I wasn't ready to buy a bigger house with a bigger garage, because that's another $100,000 or whatever, probably even more in this crazy market now. But it leads to all these other costs, the insurance to insure all these things, like motorcycles. Like, you got a street bike that's got a big engine in it, you're paying, I don't know how much for insurance on that stuff. Tools, like, not so much in my line of work, but like, you look at like any like mechanics or heavy equipment mechanics. I remember there was a machine shop I used to do work for. He had this Mac toolbox that he had it was a $15,000 toolbox.
The toolbox. That's the key part.
Just the box.
Yes.
Not the contents.
Not just the contents.
It's this red sheet metal thing on caster wheels. Like, and he was so proud of this thing, he didn't want to get it scratched, so he kept it in his office. So anytime he needed a tool, he had to walk like 20 feet to go into his office and grab a tool out of his toolbox. And then eventually he's like, well, this is dumb. I should roll it out into my shop. But then he built a like plywood closet to like cover the toolbox so that it wouldn't get damaged. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But like you see that in like a lot of mostly like auto mechanic garages where they have like it's just you're basically well, I don't know, it's compensating for something, but it's like the guys have like $20,000 or $50,000. Like, I don't know. I might be even underestimating by this point. Like the prices seem to just keep going up, but they got these amazing toolboxes with like airbrushing on them. And like, you can finance these things. I have a buddy who financed this Snap-on toolbox. Like, and then you can get traded. If once you're tired of your toolbox, you trade it in and get a new one. Like it's turning into a car now. Like,
so
wow.
I got a couple of questions. First, I think some people in the trades have to buy their own tools, right? And then the next thing I was going to say, my understanding is that tools don't really hold their value very well. So you might be able to get some decent stuff on the secondhand market. Is that true or no?
I'll weigh on that first, and then Cory can think about his response. A lot of the tools that I need to own are more precision type hand tools. And if you've got a set of Snap-on sockets or Snap-on offset wrenches or combination wrenches, those are still going to hold their value because Snap-on is a lifetime guarantee. So it's still as good as the day you bought it from that point of view. I think what you're referring to is perhaps the trades, like carpentry or places where you need a lot of power tools, and they're upgraded every year. Like every year, Milwaukee has a new tool or DeWalt has a new tool. So I definitely, for everything at home, it's all used tools. Like my chop saw, my, the table saw, it's off what I can find on the classifieds, buy as high quality as I can for the lowest cost I can find, right? From a professional point of view, I need to use high quality tools just because it says it's got a lifetime guarantee. When I'm on the top of a mountain with a helicopter, having it break is not an option. I need the best quality, right? So those kind of tools hold their value, but the electronic, the trendy, the new saw, the new things don't hold it. I don't know. What do you think, Cory? Do I have to supply my own stuff? Do you, or what do you see from that side for you?
Yeah, I've always had to supply my own stuff. So for me, like I probably only have about a couple grand wrapped up in my tools, maybe 2,500, including my toolbox. The most expensive things are the measuring tools, like the micrometers, the verniers, that sort of thing.
Totally, yeah. Same with me as like I've got to have a Fluke multimeter that's worth $500, like.
Yeah, and I might have to get one of those eventually too, because I do travel as a service tech, and I'm mostly doing mechanical stuff right now, but they are wanting to train me and do more electrical. So then, that'll be more cost. And you don't want to have some Canadian Tire $20 multimeter when you're checking this 600 volt panel. Like it's not safe.
Yeah.
But as far as like ratchets and Snap-on stuff goes, it's not as common in my line of work. Maybe more if you're like a millwright working in a factory and stuff. A lot of times they'll have their tools paid for though sometimes. For me, I'm good with just buying a ratchet set from Canadian Tire, getting the Mastercraft, the one with like the lifetime warranty. You break the ratchet, sure, you'll break a ratchet every once in a while, but you just take it back and you're good. But it's not like I'm working on a machine on a mountain like you are. I can always just run out and grab a new one. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I mean, I've got a lot of it. It's interesting when I finally get to financial independence. I mean, I'm gonna keep my tools. I mean, it's the FI garage. I love working in the garage, but I'm not really working on cars. But there's a boat to fix. There's other things. There's always something to fix, right? But my tools that I carry for work, I don't know if I keep them. Like, it's interesting because my grandfather was in the Royal Air Force in Africa, and I still have, like, do you know what British Whitworth tools are, Cory? This is like a total trivia question for listeners here. British Whitworth sizes. You ever heard of that?
Whitworth sounds very familiar, but I don't know.
It was this crazy set of wrenches that they used on, I guess they must have been like British fighter planes in the Second World War. And they're like, people are going to be like going, okay, tune out this show when you say like there's 11/32 seconds wrench, there's a 3/4, there's a 5/8, all that. We know all that stuff, but they had like 1640 seconds was a wrench size, and you're like, what? But I mean, he passed away with all his tools from his life, and I'm kind of going, when I hit FI, I'm definitely going to keep some tools around, but I've been paring down a little bit as I kind of get close. I'm like, why do I need to have 3 socket sets that are 1/2-inch drive? I don't need them. I'm not using them. I need to. And you brought up a pretty good point there, economist. There is a used market for this, and there's a good resale on some of this stuff. I mean, obviously you're not getting top dollar, but it's kind of a nice asset to have down the road is your tools, is your tool collection. I mean, probably more of an asset for you to use, but if you needed to make it through that sequence of returns risk year, you could sell $5,000 worth of tools, right?
Right.
So let's finish this thing up with a bit more of a car focused discussion, because let's face it, we're all pretty bad at buying used cars, cars in general. I'll let the economist tell us a little bit about his car story. This was going a few years back now, where
the one you helped me fix on the side of the road.
Yeah, there's that one, and then what was the one? My favorite is the Nissan truck from like circa early 90s that he
That's
found.
The one.
Oh, that one. Yeah. So he found more money in the glove box than the truck than he paid for the truck. Like, this is fantastic stuff like that. Yeah.
Plus some tools. And a $20 Canadian Tire multimeter.
That's right. Yeah. What else did you own? What else did you own?
The axle did fall off, and I had to call up the mechanic to help me bolt it back together.
Yeah, that did happen. But you've owned a few gems, a few years ago that, and this is gonna. Yeah. I think we're lucky here on the West Coast because older cars just last a little bit longer. They're not exposed to the harsh winters of Ontario. The salt. I don't think they use salt in the roads anymore back there anymore. Do they?
No, they definitely use salt.
Oh, do they? Okay.
It's salt. It's terrible.
So you're not finding that many 20-year-old cars on the road because they just can't last that long unless they're really well looked after type thing. But the economist nailed it down with some great values.
Yeah, I've owned so many I can't remember, but I don't think it was ever more than $2,000 that I paid, except for a couple.
Okay, here's the question. To the panel. Cheapest vehicle you ever bought that was road legal and you could drive for, let's call it 6 months without major repairs. Like it was turnkey condition.
Not the truck.
Not the truck.
Not the $50 truck. Well, it didn't last 6 months.
Well, there you go. So maybe the minivan.
Yeah, I think it was. I think I paid $300 for that.
That's a sweet deal.
Yeah,
nice.
Cory.
Well, see, I don't know. I'm going to be disappointing here and say that like I've had a pretty brief automotive history, and my daily drivers I've actually bought new. And
interesting.
So my first car, it was a 2002 Neon, but it was actually a leftover. Like this would have been when the 2004s were coming out. So I managed to get a pretty good deal on that. My dad actually, he used to have a side gig. He called himself the automotive negotiator.
Oh, I like it.
He loved the game of negotiating with salespeople because he was a salesperson himself after he stopped doing the appliance repairman thing, and he just loved screwing with salespeople and knowing all the mind games they were playing. So when we went, like he was always for buying, even though my parents were very frugal or still are frugal, he always liked buying new cars. And yeah, he took me into the dealership. There's this car had been sitting on the lot for like a year and a half, and we dickered back and forth and got to the point where like they wouldn't move any more on price, and he basically said, okay, well, we'll go find a better deal somewhere else. And as we were walking out the door, the sales guy said, well, if you want to play those games, we're not going to give you a call tomorrow, to tell you come back in. And I'm looking at my dad like, Dad, I really like that car. I want to buy that car. I don't care how much it costs. He's like, just trust me, son. And I go to work the next day. I come home and my dad's like, hey, so the dealership called. So I'm like, what? He's like, want to go pick up your car? I'm like, oh, okay, so the system works. So that car, it was out the door, like taxes, everything in, it was like 14,700, so pretty cheap for a new car.
Yeah.
My current daily driver, it's a 2015 Mazda 3, which I also bought new. I had looked at the used stuff because I wanted a Mazda 3, but this was the new generation. I like the looks of the new generation. And I was doing the math, and it looked like I was only really saving myself like $2,000 for each year that I went older. I was saving myself, which I mean is a lot of money, but I don't know. For me, I don't know. I don't know how to justify this, but
No, well, because that's going to be my first question. So think about it.
I know. So I've looked at now at what my car is worth 5 years later, and I've lost half the value. So
right.
So
But,
I paid. They were asking
relevant
like
how much it is. It's just like a percentage.
Okay, all right. So I've lost $10,000 over 5 years, so like $2,000 a year. But I haven't had to spend anything on maintenance. As you mentioned,
it's interesting that your value went down at the same value that you calculated buying a used car would.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
It's
kind of on par.
That's how
right?
it works, right? Yeah.
It's how it works. And for me, like I'm a bit of a perfectionist or OCD with my cars, and I feel more comfortable just owning it from new, and I'll drive it till the wheels fall off. Like with my Neon, I owned it for 12 years.
Yeah.
So because I'm owning them long term, I don't feel as bad about buying new. I definitely, I got a pretty good deal. It was 21 grand, taxes, everything in for this car. So as far as buying new, you could do worse. It's still not optimal, but for me, like especially with the salt, the rust being such an issue, I like stick shift cars. I was worried about people just grinding gears or whatever. That's just my personal preference. I get it oil sprayed every year because the salt just eats away at cars. And you know, you could argue the environmental issues of oil spraying. There's a little bit of drippage that happens for a week after you get it done. But there's also the cost to the environment of that car sitting in the junkyard when it's rusting away. So
yeah, totally.
I don't know. It's one of those conundrums, but yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting that you've chosen new.
You're not going to answer your own question?
My question?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, what's your
cheapest car you got?
Oh, my own question. Yeah, the cheapest car I ever got. Well, yeah, I had a run of cars actually. They were the oh, now you caught me off guard because I was totally thinking about something else I was going to talk to Cory about. It came from over there. The Chevrolet 1980. I'm trying to remember the year now. Like I'm thinking 86, 87. Chevrolet Citation 4-door hatchback. Got to be up there with the ugliest cars they put out in the 80s. There was a lot of ugliness in the 80s. These were ugly cars, but they had a nice 2.8 V6 in them. That thing had some pull. $300 got me one that was rust-free, low kilometers.
Nice. First
car I ever owned with power windows. First car.
So it wasn't a base.
It wasn't a base. You don't drive base. You're gonna Cory, you've got to see the video that The Economist showed me a couple years ago. We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
And it's like these British
salesmen.
They're salesmen, right? So they get cars as the perks, and they're like, they would compare themselves about what trim level their company car had, right? And it's like, good salesman never drives a base model. It's classic. It's classic 80s too. They're all like classic 80s British cars. It's perfect. Yeah, we'll put
You'll
that
see
in.
some ugly cars in there too.
It's entertainment. Yeah, but no, this was not a base. I don't know if they had different models of the Citation. They were all pretty garbage, but hey, $300, and I drove it out of there, and it ran for a long time. I actually pulled the engine out of it because I found I was broke. I was a broke college kid, obviously, right? It's like I found another one that had. So the story is the police pulled me over. And it was
this isn't drivable.
It was not. No. Well, interesting. It was totally drivable. But one of the tests they made me do was put the emergency brake on. Remember those old foot emergency brakes, right? So you push to the floor,
right.
And they're like, now put it in gear and take your foot off the brake. I'm like, this is gonna end well. So I put it in gear.
Just kept going.
And it just kind of like creeps forward a little bit. I mean, it's an 86 Chevy Citation. It wasn't beautiful. And they're like, I think you need a vehicle inspection. I'm like, well, there's the death of the Citation, because the vehicle inspection is going to cost me way more and to do all the repairs and whatever. And it was fine rolled anyway. So I'm like, I found another Citation for $275. So there's the cheapest price.
Oh, you beat me.
But I had to swap the engine from the good Citation to the. It's a lot of work. My girlfriend's dad at the time was not super impressed with me, because this is getting off track for listeners as well. But well, Cory might know, but like the Chevy Citation was a front engine, front wheel drive Chevy, which was, they kind of started that in the 80s, because before it was super easy, right? You pull the engine out of the top, out of the hood. Well, these cars had a sub chassis, so it was easier to drop a sub chassis with the transmission, the engine, the whole thing. So I had this car jacked up 15 feet in the air, like totally sketchily, using like the apple trees in the garage roof, so I could like wheel out this big V6 car and like put the car down, drag it out of the way, bring the other one in. It's quite the procedure. There's a lot of beers drank that week.
Nice.
Anyway, yeah, I've gotten better at cars. I run 20-year-old cars now, or try to keep them running. And we haven't really given any super useful car advice on this show, if people are still listening. Cory can give some good rationale for owning new. Do you pay cash or do you finance? Quick answer there.
Yeah, so for cash, you'll typically get a bit of a discount. I think it was $1,000 or $2,000 discount on my Mazda when I bought it. Even though they'll say it's 0% financing,
it's not. There's something built in there. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And if you're buying new, drive the wheels off it, like you said, right? That's what makes that work, right? If you're buying used, and this is a discussion too, is buying used, is I'm kind of the fan where I look at a used car going, I want to buy something that's about 5 to 7 years old, because it's still in sort of the low 100K area, where it's had that, the 100K maintenance is a lot of times the big one, where a timing belt gets done, all the brakes get done, the clutch, like there's a lot of things that happen around there. So if you're in the 120 to 150 range, those cars are still good. They're going to give you good life until around 200 plus. That's when you start finding, I don't know, you're in your experience too, but I've always found when you hit 200, there's some suspension work that needs to be done. Bushings are beaten out by then, CV joints, like there's just the wear and tear adds up over the kilometers, right? I mean, we're not talking about regular maintenance. Any car is going to need a muffler, it's going to need brakes, it's going to need tires, it's going to need a battery, right? It's finding that sweet spot for me, is that 6 or 7 year old car that you're paying a little less on, you can run safely and cheaply for 5 years, and before it depreciates too much, you can get a little bit of return from your investment there, and then sort of cycle through. That's kind of the program I've been running to save myself money on cars, and then DIY what you can, right?
So what's your net loss over that 5 years? Purchase price, not maintenance, right?
Okay, good question. I'm just pulling this out of the air because I haven't got a spreadsheet on this. I'm not a spreadsheet guy. I've said that before, but we bought our Nissan Pathfinder for $10,500. It's a 2003 Nissan. We bought it. Oh, what year are we in? 2021. We bought it in 2014, 2015, around there. So it was a little older than usual, but I wanted the SUV for reasons. Market value today, I mean, I'm sure I'll get hate mail on this too, but maybe like $4,000. It's in fairly good condition. That's kind of ballparking it. So yeah, $6,000 over
6 years.
6 years. So it's $1,000 a year instead of $2,000 a year.
So it's half. Yeah. Interesting.
And honestly,
how much do you pay in maintenance and parts and stuff?
Not that much.
Okay.
No,
what about the mental cost of not knowing if the car will make it to work? What about that?
Oh, well, when you work from home, you don't have that mental cost. No, it's funny you mentioned that, because it's one of the reasons I do have BCAA. Like, why does a mechanic have BCAA? But it's for the times when I'm out of town and my wife is driving an older vehicle. And once well, I shouldn't say that because there's another story there, but with these current vehicles, once she's been stranded because the clutch slave cylinder went on her. Right. And I mean, I've driven home without a clutch, so it wouldn't have been a big deal for me, but
Timing, right?
fair enough. She was on the side of the road. I want to end this episode with a little car story of my own, because just for my own entertainment value. I liked Cory's story about buying the car 5 hours away and it broke down halfway and got it towed. And it must have been catastrophic if you had to get it towed.
Okay, yeah. So
Well, you probably didn't have tools, first off.
Well,
I also
no, I'll call BS on that, because you go buy a car like that, you're bringing a lot of tools with you.
So I did the week before I signed up for CAA. I got their do you have CAA and
BCAA is the same thing.
Yeah,
it's the same thing. It's
okay.
CAA. Yeah.
Yeah, I got the premium membership, which allowed me one tow of 320 kilometers. Luckily, Napanee is 327 kilometers away from home. So I only had to pay an extra $3 a kilometer. It worked out to $21 to get my car
for a $300 tow.
Yeah. So the issue that was wrong with it, I didn't know what I was doing. I'd never had a carbureted car before. All I knew was I pulled into a gas station to fill up with gas, and I went to start it and it wouldn't start. And I had French people coming up to me and going, "Oh, you got to take out the filter," and you go poof, poof, and then it works. And I'm like, I don't know what this guy's saying. And I didn't have did I have a multimeter on me? I probably didn't even know how to use it back then. This was the car I learned how electrical systems work. And later on, what happened, I found out what happened by just replacing parts till it worked. And it was just the voltage regulator wasn't working, wasn't allowing the alternator to charge the battery. But I actually went through to two voltage regulators to actually fix it, because the first one that I bought was faulty and actually overcharged the battery. But anyways, that's inside baseball crap. Yeah. Oh, one thing I do want to mention too, if you don't want to pay for CAA or BCAA or whatever, I don't know if you guys have it, but the Triangle MasterCard with Canadian Tire
has roadside. Yep.
I don't know if you have to get the black one. There's
it's
the
free
regular
anyway.
Triangle.
It's free anyway.
The World Elite.
Yep.
Yeah.
But you might not
qualify.
qualify.
The Triangle World. Yeah. Well, you have to lie about your wage, your salary.
Yeah.
If you say that you make 80 grand, I shouldn't be saying.
I'm not lying.
Anyways,
video now. I'm not lying.
If you make 80 grand a year, or say that you do, you can get the World Elite Triangle,
which has
MasterCard.
Roadside assistance.
Free roadside assistance.
Absolutely. Now, I'm going to do this two ways. I'm going to still tell my story because I think it's a good story. But for all those listeners that don't give about my story, you can tune out now. And we thank Cory for being on the show. But so here's my story.
That's not a very nice send off.
No. I'm just gonna there's 8 minutes left in this section of the Zoom meeting. I'm telling Cory this story. I don't mind who listens to it, but he's a car guy, so he'll appreciate this. BMW 1971 BMW 2002.
Oh yes.
The little 2-door coupe that they had back then, that had a Hemi in it. Being a Dodge guy, yes, it had hemispherical heads. For those of you that don't know, Hemi means hemispherical heads. It's the shape design inside the. Anyway, we're getting off track again. Listen to So I bought this. I bought this red 1971 BMW 2002 from a friend, which we didn't talk about, but never buy a used car from a friend. So I have this car, and it's a 1971. It's got some problems. It needs some parts. It's carbureted. It's the rear, around the rear pillar on the driver's side, they rust out. It's typical in those cars. And, I was like, holy crap. Parts are expensive for these older vehicles. I'm sure you can relate with it was a Duster, right? Anyway. So I'm like, yeah, even though I can shop online, you know what I really need? I need a parts car.
Yeah.
So you're like, how easy is a 1971 BMW 2002 to find as a parts car? Well, sure enough, a couple months later, there's this blue one in Vancouver, North Vancouver. Well, actually, East Vancouver near the Coliseum. The economists will know where I mean by the PNE. But I live in Victoria, so this car is not 5 hours away, but it's a ferry ride, and it's a ways. It's in an underground garage. It hasn't been driven for 2 years. Status unknown. But it's $500 and it's complete. Like, it's everything in the car. So I pack the tools. I walk on the ferry because my anticipation is I'm driving this car back to the island. Like,
the parts car.
I'm driving the parts car back to Victoria.
I like your confidence.
Right? I'm
nice.
confident because it costs us $100 to get on the ferry with a vehicle. So, and I can't, like, logistically, I can't take a vehicle and bring a vehicle back. And to put it on a trailer to get it towed, it's like double the value of the vehicle. This is not working for my financial state at that time. So I get on the ferry. I borrow my mom's car. And I've got my tools in there, and so I drive out and I check this thing out, and it's in an underground garage, so it's dry, which is good because it was wintertime. But it doesn't run, it doesn't start. The fuel smells terrible. I'm like, all right, I'll give you $400 for it. The guy's like, done. Just get it out of my underground garage. Whatever you do. So it rolled. I kind of pushed it back and forth. It rolled, and I'm like, okay, yeah. The brakes work, can't get it started. So I went out and I got a jerry can, and I put the jerry can in the trunk, and I spliced into the fuel line. So I knew I was getting clean fuel up to the front, right? And I kind of got the fuel situation figured out. Of course, I have my mom's car there. So I've got like this little Volkswagen Beetle. She's got a newer Beetle, but in like jump starting this thing and like, I think I brought a battery with me anyway. Couple hours, I get it running. And I'm so happy with myself. I'm like, I've got clean fuel in the trunk. I'm like driving it around the underground. I'm like, the brakes work. It kind of like, it's carbureted. It's not running awesome, but it's running. So I'm like, okay, I think I can actually go get 1 day insurance on this vehicle that I now own and drive it to Victoria. But while I'm driving around the underground garage, I'm like feeling this like lumpiness in the back end. I'm like, well, that's kind of weird. It's a rear wheel drive car. I better have a look at that. Well, sure enough, it's rusted out in the same place mine is, in the back. And I'm like, ooh, that's not safe at all. So I get a bunch of lumber and I build this underground garage. I build like a structure, and I use Herc straps, and I basically force the back of this car back together. I'm like, I've only got to go like 30K on not highway roads, onto a ferry, and then like 2K to my destination. I'm young and dumb enough that I think I can make it. I get the day insurance. I got this thing running. It's strapped together. I get to the ferry. I'm like, I've made it. Home free. I'm on the ferry. I'm getting to Victoria. Once I get to the island, I'm golden. So it's an 1.5 hour ferry crossing. This is back in non-COVID times. So you're upstairs enjoying the white spot food. And I come back downstairs and I'm like, there's a puddle underneath this car. So I'm like, wonder what it is, right? And it's like under the engine. So you're like, what comes out of an engine? Coolant, oil. It's a standard, of course, because it's an old car. So dip my finger in and do the old smell test. And then like the old school mechanics would do the taste test. I don't do the taste test. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's brake fluid. I'm like, oh, that's not real good at all. But it wasn't the brakes. It was the fluid that fed the clutch. It actually had a hydraulic clutch. And I'm like, oh, I got no clutch. And get in, and I'm sure the pedal's just like floppy to the floor. I'm like, well, it's only a few K down the road. I made it this far. I'm not getting towed off the ferry. So for those of you listening still, is you can start and drive a car with no clutch, but you have to be ready, because when you hit the starter, you're in gear, because you can't start it in neutral and put it in gear. It has to be in gear, right? So it's like the ferry's unloading, and it's like, I got to wait until there's enough room that there's no stopping once we're running. So it's like, okay, it's go time. Click, click, click. And the car kind of like hops a little bit. You give it a little bit of gas and then it fires up and off you go. I'm in first gear. I'm like, well, I can't go like 25K all the way to my destination, right? So it's like my first experience of going, okay, I know you can do this if you match revs and you shift properly. And it's like, you can't get it in a second. I'm like, oh God.
Wasn't there.
I'm like, ooh, I got it into third though. And it's like, I'm like, well, third, I can do 50K. I'm safe, right? So I get it to my destination, which the best part is the destination wasn't even my house. It was the parking lot of the hangar I was working in at the time, and it's like died there, and it lived there for the next 8 months, and I parted it out, and it was up on blocks, and eventually my boss is like, you've got to get that car out of here. But it was an adventure, and part of the fun of why we like working on cars, the troubleshooting, the experience, the value that it brings, the stories that they are, so cheers, boys.
Cheers. Thanks for the beer, Cory.
Yeah, thank you very much for the beer. Well,
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're gonna drink the accountant's one because he didn't bother to show up, so that's fine with us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we appreciate you having him on the show and chatting with us. And thanks everybody else for listening to the FI Garage. We promise we won't talk about cars or trades next time. We'll get back deep into the finances, but it's great to have somebody on the show that's also on their FI journey and has some experience in something I can relate to.
All right.
Parting words, buddy?
For me or the accountant?
For you.
I don't know. I just got to say, I'm really happy that I found this community. I've been like living my life as this frugal weirdo and felt kind of like an outsider watching all these people spend all their money and not save for another day. And even though you know what you're doing is right, when you see everybody doing something else, it makes you question what you're doing. And up until a year ago, I had no idea that the Canadian FI community was as big as it was. I had read Mr. Money Mustache like 5 years ago and read through all his blogs, all his articles. I was like, yep, that was great. And
you're going to get cut off. You're going to get cut off. Okay. You're awesome.
I got 40 seconds.
Go.
Okay, so anyways, then a year ago, was listening to Rational Reminder. They mentioned Scott Rickens. He talked about the Choose FI community. I found the Choose FI community, which brought me here, and it just makes me so happy that I have, like-minded people to talk about this stuff with.
It is freaking awesome. Man.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on.
All right. Thanks for having me, guys. I hope we can have beers in person someday.
Totally.
After,
FI Garage Cross Country Tour 2021.
Nice.
22.